Welcome to HeartMind-ify. Before we start the show, just a reminder to share, rate, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. And please give us a 5-star rating. It helps us beat the big tech algorithms.
I'm John Izzy. Change can be difficult for a lot of us, but when we understand what makes us tick, we develop a better understanding of who we are and begin a journey of discovering our best self. Join me for a free session at johnizzy.com.
And I'm Kim Cordy, creator of the Emotion Chef Framework, an emotion management tool. Thoughts drive emotions, and emotions drive thoughts, but it's our emotions that drive our decisions and behaviors. Find out more at kimcordy.com.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Knowing each other personally and socially for the past 10 years, Kim and John have joined forces, bringing years of experience and training, providing a platform for growth and personal development, along with a little humor. John is the heart, Kim is the mind, and together they are HeartMind-ify. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm John Izzy, and with me is Kim Cordy. Hello, Kim. How are you?
Hi, John. As usual, I am fantastic and so excited for today's show. We have our very first guest. As I mentioned in our very first show, this is show number 4, so it's not that long ago, but we are going to mix it up with other people, interviewing people just like you and I, not necessarily experts in a particular field, but experts in their own life who can give us some of their insights as to how they create or how to create heart-mind balance based on their experience.
Right? And I think today's show is really going to emphasize that, because who we have on today's show is an RN at a major hospital here in Virginia. She has received many honors as a nurse and is currently an educator. Her and her husband just celebrated 35 years together. She is a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 2. She also volunteers her free time with Bikers Against Child Abuse. Welcome to the show, Gina.
Hi, John. Hi, Kim. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Well, thank you, Gina. Kim and I are grateful that you agreed to be a part of the show and willing to share with us different aspects about your professional and your personal life. You know, it's important for our listeners to have guests that are relatable, and we believe you fit that bill. One of the things that Kim and I share in common is the importance of creating balance between the heart and the mind. And with that being said, we're interested in hearing how you create balance. But before we jump into the tough questions, I think our listeners would like to hear how you started out in nursing.
Well, I didn't go into the nursing field until I was 40. So I've been a nurse for almost 20 years. I just decided one day that I wanted a career that I could actually take anywhere in the world, be in demand, and just decided on nursing. So I started as a tech with the hospital I'm at. I went through nursing school. I became an RN. Then I became an RN4. Then I became a charge nurse. And now I'm the educator.
Wow, that's
Fantastic.
I know that's you didn't start nursing till you were 40.
I didn't go back to college until I was 40.
Shows you it's never too late.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So most people are familiar with the challenges of being a nurse, for the most part. How does your team handle the stress of the day?
Well, and that's a good way to say it. We are a team. So we're always looking out for one another as far as that goes. Patient care, the tasks that we have for the day. As far as handling situations, say if we had a code, which is where you have to revive someone, we have debriefing. We go through our process of all the tasks that need to happen with that code. But when everything is said and done, we all get together, whomever was involved, and we talk about it. We talk about everything that happened, and we sit down and debrief.
And in part of that debrief, are you talking about how they felt about the whole situation? Are emotions a part of it?
Absolutely. You can, how did you feel coming into the situation, your part, whether you were a recorder or a person that was getting medications, or if you were taking the family out of the room, if the family wanted to leave the room, or if you were in the room with the family. So we talk about all aspects of what happened during that process.
So in some ways, you debrief, but you reconnect because you have to kind of shut down.
Absolutely.
That's interesting to me because you have to take on a critical role. Let's just say it's an emergency situation, and then you have to immediately jump into action. Gina, how do you cut off what's going on around you and jump right into being a nurse?
Because we all know what part we have. So we'll use the code again as an example. You are all assigned tasks during that. You know exactly what you're doing. You all focus that, I guess that would be your mind part.
Mm-hmm.
You're all focusing on what you've learned, how you've been educated, how you've trained. And in that, you're still, me personally, I can only speak for myself, as I'm getting medications or I'm recording for charting or legality, I'm recording. I'm still silently praying for this person. I'm a very spiritual person. So in my head, I have my heart and my mind working there together. But I can say for me that when a situation arises, you go into your educational mode. And then your heart comes in when it's all said and done. You're debriefing. That's when our heart comes in, our debriefing part.
So I like how you said and you spoke to the heart and the mind. With our current landscape with COVID-19, has that challenged this balance at all?
For me, again, I can only speak personally. For me, absolutely, it's very challenging. It's you have so many more tasks before you even walk into a patient's room. Your protective gear, your are you hooked up correctly if you have a PAPR on, all of these added tasks before. Whereas before, 5 years ago, I would have walked into your room and said, "Hey, Mr. Izzy, how are you today?" Now I'm outside preparing myself before I can walk into your room. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes.
Yes.
It's an added responsibility that is very challenging and scary sometimes.
I've seen in the papers where there's actually some people in the profession who have left the workforce because it's been so much for them. Is that a has that become a challenge?
And yes, I believe that. Again, I can't speak for anyone else, but I believe that people have left the force because it's a very scary thing that we can't see. It's not like heart disease and diabetes and different cancer. Even though we can't see cancer, we see it when they operate, so to speak. Does that make sense to you? You see what a tumor looks like. This is different. We don't know what to do with it. It's an unseen um, degree added to our task for the day. That is, it's very challenging. Yes.
I was reading an article this morning in the New York Times about a physician who suggested that even before COVID-19, healthcare workers were already vulnerable to depression and suicide. He said that mental health experts now fear even more will be prone to trauma related disorders, that as the pandemic intensity fades, so does the adrenaline. He said what's left are the emotions of dealing with the trauma and stress of the many patients we cared for. I thought his use of the word adrenaline was interesting.
And that's a very good way for him to say that. I personally, that's how I feel. I get out of my car, I put my mask on, I go in, and I'm in that mode of, do I have my mask on? Have I washed my hands multiple times? Am I not touching anything? I'm using my knuckles on elevator buttons. I'm not grabbing doors the way I used to. So yes, you get in that mode, and you're in that mode all day. And then when I walk out, I get to the end of my day and I get to the parking garage again, and I just take a deep breath. It's just a deep breath. Okay, whew, I made it through another one. I mean, it's added a lot of emotional and physical challenges to our profession. You have to constantly make sure you're in the proper gear. You have to constantly make sure you're doing the proper things, which you did before, but now it's more intensified.
So how is this impacting new nurses? Because you're an educator. You are probably closer to the experience of the new nurse than most others. How is this working for them? Like, how is this hitting them? How are you explaining to keep this heart mind balance? Like you said before, you've got your debrief, but there's a lot more than just a single event, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the way that I approach these newer nurses, male and female, and of course they're younger now. You still have older people such as myself in their 40s that decided as a career, but the majority, you have people in their 20s. I just tell them, do what you were taught to do. You know, we were taught to wash our hands. We were taught to be sterile, so to speak, and keep up those. Don't drop your guard on that. But emotionally, you can see when these young men and ladies see everybody in a mask, when they see they've started their career, 2 or 4 years ago, and none of this was here then. So now they're walking into the facility, actually seeing everybody in a mask, all the precautions, and I think it's a little scary for them.
How do you suggest to the new nurses? Well, let me put it this way. When you walked into a patient's room before COVID-19, you could gauge how they were feeling based on their facial expressions. Were they smiling? Did they have a frown? But now their facial expressions are mostly covered up with a mask. So how do you tell the new nurses what to look for? That has to be difficult for them, not able to see their patients' expressions.
I try to give them the guidance that I was given when I first started my career. And I had an older nurse. She retired a couple years after I started, but I will never forget her. She was such a compassionate, caring person, and a beautiful nurse. Their eyes. I always tell them to look at a person's eyes, look in their eyes, and they're going to tell you their emotions by looking in their eyes. You can tell what a person, if they're feeling pain, if they're sad, if they're even excited. You can see that in their eyes. And that's a very good point to bring up, because we mentioned that a couple weeks ago. We were a little sad. Some of the ladies will go down the hall and say, "I am smiling under here. I'm smiling at you." And I will say to them, "I can tell because your eyes are smiling at me too." So I ask them, I guide them to do that. Always look in their eyes. And I think you can gain some insight on what they're feeling.
Regina, for the very first time locally, I volunteered on Friday to help the testing process, the COVID testing. And my role was I had to wear a mask, but I had to talk to people through their car with it and windows rolled up and sometimes tinted windows. And at the end of it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I couldn't express to people, happiness. Thank you so much. I'm very much, like, oh, thank you. You kind of hear it in my voice. And they couldn't even hear me. And it was a little frustrating. So I'm like, yeah, I got to get cards that say a smiley face or something, because you do want to make sure that you're connecting with them, that you're sorry you have to ask for their driver's license a second time. And it's just so hard to communicate without it. So I can't imagine the impact that has had on your nurses to not have. You really need a connection with patients. I was just connecting with them just to get their information so that I could give them their packet and they could go on and get tested. So I could see totally and relate to the challenges of not being able to really see and connect with your patients like you used to.
It is a challenge, and it is, but like I said, we learn ways to read the patients,
That's awesome.
and that is fantastic. You know that by like I said, looking in their eyes, in their body language, and you learn different ways. And to be honest, we have in the past month we've learned to adapt and carry on with different ways of knowing what's going on with our patient.
It seems like you almost have to do that considering that, a patient today can't have family members or loved ones at the hospital with them. So you are their only connection to the medical as well as the outside world. I mean, it's you guys.
And you're absolutely right about that. And I can tell you the facility that I work for, we take that very personally. We make sure that we are their family. We have become their family. I personally always think when you get a patient, you're just thrown into someone's life, or all of a sudden there you are. You automatically become a part of their family. You're not in the hospital because you feel good. So there's always some kind of challenge that got you there. So you need the support and kindness and compassion. And we as nurses become that.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. It seems like, I've been in the hospital a couple times and, you always look to the people that work there to kind of make you feel comfortable because you don't want to be there. And it's kind of nerve wracking, especially if you're having, if it's a serious situation where you don't have contact with loved ones. And wow, that just takes that that takes a lot. That means a lot. So thank you for saying that. One of the things Kim and I were talking about was the toolkits that you might use with balancing your heart and mind. In other words, how do you take care of yourself and separate work from home? Or do you?
Well, yeah. So I, a few years learned, I don't think in the beginning of your profession, you never leave it at work. You're always taking it home because we're caring for human beings. We're caring for people. So I couldn't have you or Kim as my patient and you had a horrible day. I couldn't just turn that off when I went home. I would still be thinking of you, hoping that you were having a good night. I would pass along to that nurse that was coming after me. Hey, they've had a little bit of a tough day. Give them a little extra TLC. So you don't always leave it at work. I've gotten better. Nursing has become more challenging over the years at saying to myself, okay, I'm in the parking garage. I've left you behind. I'm now going home. How I balance is I love nature. I love my children, grandchildren, husband, the organization I volunteer for. So they're all my outlets. They give me joy and peace and comfort. That's all of my outlets. And nurses are famous for not taking care of themselves. And I think we come to a point, I can speak for myself, in your career where you realize you have to start taking care of yourself.
Well, what would you say to one of the younger nurses? Because these boundaries that you've put up, just some of those examples, and that self-care, how would you encourage really not even just younger nurses, newer nurses, but just people in general to see the importance of doing it, not waiting until they're burnt out? I mean, that's the problem, right? They're not filling their tank. They're not taking care of their vehicle, so it's harder for them to keep going at some point. So is there something that you have advice wise as to doing it sooner in life?
Well, I don't know. I mean, nursing to me, it's almost like a mother's love. So you love your children. If you're a mother, a stepmother, a adoptive mother, you love your children. So you're always putting them first. And I think your true compassionate nurses, you're always putting your patient above you. So there's something you're caring for. So I would say to newer nurses, you have to realize that in order for you to continue to do what you love and spread this compassion in your career, you have to also love yourself. So if you need that 15 minutes of outside sunshine, or you need that phone call from that best friend, or you need that phone call from your mother or your father or your grandparents or whomever, make sure you do it. Make sure you make time for you.
That's perfect advice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Regina, I just want to say thank you so much. And I want to reiterate, going back to your your concept of having the debrief and the reconnecting, there is so much evidence to the fact if we can talk about our emotions and give them a label, that the benefits are so great. What you as nurses deal with, it's called emotional labor. And that means that you're having to put on a happy face and you're having to give compassion where you might not have it in you because you become so drained. The act of releasing your emotions by looking at them, labeling them, and then handling them, saying this is how I feel, and then giving yourself that permission to have that feeling, and then let it go and take care of yourself. It's what keeps us from going down that emotional, physical rabbit hole that is so hard to get out of when we get down too deep. So, keeping that sort of debrief and reconnect is super important. And I really am grateful that you shared that. But I just wanted to add the point of putting a label on those emotions. It's good for your brain. It's good for your emotional well-being and resilience.
You know, Kim, it is. And also, too, it's this whole concept of self awareness and understanding of what makes us who we are by our emotions and how we think and respond to those feelings and thoughts. You know, Gina, as I was listening to you talk, one of the things that came to mind was the fact that if you as a nurse is having a bad day, your patients are going to notice your mood and will most likely be affected by that mood. And so it's really important to be able to connect to them in a way where you're there for them and you're helping them with their needs and their emotions and their worries and what's going on in their life. It's almost as if it's selflessness, right? And then use the debriefing to take care of yourself during the day. You know, we were talking about this last week during our podcast on meditation. It's the self reflection that I think is so important for us because if we don't do that, then we begin to run away with our emotions or we shut them off to the point where even our actions are represented by feelings of anxiety or burnout and possibly inappropriate behaviors.
I think that's a very good thing to say. And I think I learned early in my career, and it's Kim had asked, what do I say to the new nurses? In the beginning, I thought I had to be this well educated person that was walking in the room, telling you how you're going to heal, telling you and showing no emotion. So I walk into, say, a husband and wife, and they're both crying. And I walk into the room as the nurse. So I thought I had to be this stoic person that was giving the facts and the science. But I had an older nurse say to me, and she retired not long after that, you have got to cry with them. You have got to feel what they're feeling with them, or you'll never make it. And to be honest with you, that was the best advice I was ever given as a nurse because I have to cry with people. If you cry, I'm going to cry. I'm an ugly crier. I'm going to cry. I'm going to.
I don't know too many pretty criers.
So for me to think, oh my goodness, I have to squash this emotion and be this scientific person, it was very hard for me. But the minute I stopped that and I walked in and I joined in their feelings of sorrow and so forth, it was just like a weight lifted off my shoulder. I've cried with many patients. I've laughed with many. I've gotten letters back from many patients. And it was just for me when I learned that I did not have to hide the emotional part of me in what I do, it was the best advice I ever got.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It's good advice for all of
Absolutely.
us,
Yeah.
right? Because if you think about someone who leads a team or is a manager and empathy and compassion is super important. And being able to deliver or bad news and still share in the emotion of that bad news. I mean, think about how much bad news has had to go out with all of these layoffs and all of the furloughs that have gone on. It's okay to feel bad about it all and to express how you feel and to let that out. So your example is amazing, not just for your fellow nurses, but just for all of us.
I would agree with you, Kim. I would also add that as a patient, when the nurses respect the human element, it retains the patient's dignity. It allows them to realize that they're human and the people taking care of them are human. And they're not just in it for a paycheck. Or they aren't just in it for, I don't know, because it's what they signed up to do. The human element is so important, and without it, patient care becomes matter of fact, and you lose the connection with the patient. It's as if the patient is just someone you are treating who is void of emotion or void of feelings. Patients need to feel that they are being treated not just for a medical condition, but on a human level, where their feelings and their anxieties and maybe their lack of understanding is respected and given the same care as the medical condition is given. It's taking care of both the medical and the human condition.
You know, my husband and I just celebrated 35 years. So I would almost bet you that he would be one, he wouldn't want to worry me of the results that he got back if something was wrong. He would be strong and the breadwinner as he's always been, and he wouldn't want to worry me. So nurses become that person that the patient doesn't want to share all of these fears and so forth with their family. They share it with the nurses. You become that person that they can be scared with. And then when that family member walks back into the room, there they are with I'm the breadwinner, I'm the head of the household. That how do I say that they're the ones in charge. But when the family's out of the room and they want to come down and really be sad and think about all of what's going on, the nurse is the one that's with them when they do that.
So that is true then. So then you are giving them their dignity back.
Absolutely.
You are giving them the respect that they need to make it through whatever condition that they're going through. And Kim, I think our podcast does that same thing. I think we are consistently looking at issues or concerns that bring balance to the heart and mind. And one is not better than the other. It's when they come together and they are in balance when we can be, the best person that we can be. And I think you being here with us today, Gina, and thank you so much for doing that, is just a testimony to a profession that is not easy and dealing with a lot of emotion and dealing with a lot of intellect and bringing that balance is so key for patients and for new nurses coming aboard. And if I have to go to the hospital, I hope you're my nurse, because that's the kind of nurse I want taking care of me.
Well, thank you, John. That's a very nice compliment.
Gina, I just want to thank you for being here with us today. Your insight into the field of nursing and then your humanity has really shown through today. And I really, really appreciate you spending the time with us. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, John. It was nice to spend this time with you and Kim today, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Gina.
So, Kim, what's going on with our next show?
Yes, John, it's my turn for the subject, and it's going to be my three brains.
What?
Yes, heart, head, and gut in decision making. A lot of people think we just have one brain, but we know that you've got a heart brain and a gut brain, and all three are implicated in our decision making. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I think it's a fascinating topic.
Well, I've never heard anything about the gut brain, so I'm kind of interested in hearing about that as well.
Don't worry, I'll tell you all about it.
I'm sure you will. Alrighty then. Thank you everyone for spending your free time with us. We'd like to thank Gina for joining us today, and remember to like and share our podcast wherever you listen. Kim, have a great week, and I will talk to you soon.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
New shows are available every Saturday right here on HeartMind-ify.podbean.com or wherever you listen. Kim and I would like to thank each and every one of you for allowing us to be a small part of your life. Be kind to yourself and remember, our hearts tell the story, but our mind is the conductor.